Welcome everyone to the quarterly report for the fourth quarter of 2021 for 5210 Fund 2. So let's start with the capital metrics up on the right-hand side. So currently, or as of the end of Q4, end of the year, there was just under $6 million of capital that's raised and deployed in the fund. The stated portfolio value, that's a single asset, is $25 million. That's a very conservative estimate of value, by the way. The debt on the asset is $18 million. And so if we sold it today using that conservative estimate, there's $1.1 million of appreciation. And you'll see as we grow the portfolio, all of that aggregate data will be kept here and demonstrated in the pie chart down below. So on a overview side of the page, in general, the fourth quarter was used to set up all of our operations at Palm Harbor Estates, hire all of our on-site staff, and then start getting bids for the capital improvement projects that we expect to do. So it takes us about a quarter typically to get our arms around an asset, get all of our software and systems and processes installed, and our on-site staff, working within those processes. And then in the second quarter of ownership, you'll see us start to implement strategy and start to gain some momentum with respect to improving performance. So that'll happen in every asset that we buy. On the acquisition side, we are in conversations with an owner, and we're going to talk about this a little bit further in the report. On the business side of things, this is probably the most exciting news to share for the quarter. So we were able to bring on two really high experienced manufactured housing staff members to our internal team. So Maria came on board as our regional property manager. She has almost 2 decades of experience in manufactured housing. And then Scott came on board as our construction manager in Q4, and he has over a decade of experience in manufactured housing as well. So really excited to have them on our team. Those two are going to be accretive to the performance of all of the properties that we own across all of our funds. But we're probably going to learn a thing or two from them as well. So very excited to have that kind of experience on our staff. On the portfolio side of things, the portfolio again consists of a single property at this point, but it performed slightly better than we projected in Q4. We almost made the preferred return. And that's because we got more vacancy filled from the seasonal RVs than what Nate had originally projected. So I want to speak to the elephant in the room here. This report's a couple days late. You'll only find this report to be late when we're trying to get something corrected. So I want to explain what that is so everybody understands it and there's no confusion. So when we acquired Palm Harbor Estates, we secured a loan from the seller. So he carried the financing on the property when we bought it. One of the things that we negotiated was a deferral of the first quarter of debt service. So our first payment's not due until January. Well, because we neglected to book that properly, the original statements and distributions that came out from Verivest were astronomically high. It looked like we made 12 to 13% in Q4. So the good news is we caught it. Our accountants worked with Verivest to make sure that they got that corrected so that there's not going to be an issue moving forward. So I just want to make sure that I address that so nobody's confused. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out, but you're going to see updated statements that reflect the actual real numbers of income from the quarter. Okay, let's talk about the property itself. So since we have a single asset here, we're going to get into details just a little bit. So you're going to see up on the right-hand side here, the property status. This is going to be updated on a quarterly basis. Eventually, you're going to see these things start to become completed, but right now they're either planned or they're in process. So on the expense reduction, every time we buy a property, one of the first things that we do when our staff and all of our systems and processes are in place is go through every expense line item at the park and see where we can shave expenses. Historically, we'll typically find gaps in that with either contractor services that are charging way more than they should be, or in some cases, we can do those internally ourselves. So things like landscaping contractors, the pool guy, the street sweeper, things that we normally have contractor services perform at the parks. Utility reimbursement. So every park like this one on the water meter side has a single water meter that comes from the city and it comes into the park and we pay that bill every month. So that water supply line also supplies every single space in the entire property. So each one of those spaces, if it's properly submetered for water, then we're allowed to reimburse ourselves, by charging the tenant for the water that they use. So in this case, most of the sites don't have submeters, and some of the ones that do are broken and they're outdated, they don't work anymore. So we're in the process of installing what's called speed read meters. So these are water meters that communicate directly with the software in our office so that nobody has to go out and read them. So it automatically auto-populates the data for the amount of usage that each space has used, and it automatically adds that to their bill as utility reimbursement. So that also allows us to detect leaks. So because it's a software program, anytime there's a leak on either side of the meter, the software will detect it and let the manager know, hey, we got a leak over here by space 59. And it's either something we need to notify the tenant about because they have a leak in their on their home, or it's something that's an underground supply leak that we'll want to fix because otherwise we're paying a higher bill than we need to. So that's in process. Sale of the park-owned homes. So currently, so during Q4 of last year, we interviewed a bunch of contractors to come in and do the work on the homes. So there's specific mobile home renovation services out there that specialize in mobile homes. And so you have to find them, you got to vet them and make sure that they're bidding properly and it fits within the budget. So we've hired some of those groups, and they're in there doing some renovations as we speak. Plan major improvements. So we're two major improvements that we're going to do on the park. One is we're going to relocate the entrance to the park. Now this is strategic because it'll allow us to gate it. And when you can gate a park, then you have more security, and eventually the park is worth more money, and the space rent in each one of the spaces can go up higher than it can without gating it. So in addition to that, we are going to remove and replace all of the pavement in the park. So currently the pavement's run its useful life. There's potholes everywhere. It's not something that you can save anymore. So it's kind of a twofold thing. One, if you do the pavement right out of the gate, it'll allow you to sell homes at a faster pace. It'll allow you to raise rent at a faster pace, but it also proves to the existing residents in the park that we mean business and that we're not just coming in here to extract as much income as we can out of them, that we actually really do want to increase their standard of living here and make their experience living in this park the best that there can be. So it just creates a really good relationship between the tenants and us as the owner and managers of the property. So that work will be done as soon as the city approves the renovation to the entrance. So those plans are at the city pending approval right now. So in addition to that, we've been tree trimming trees that haven't been trimmed in 10 years. We've been stump grinding to get all of those. We've got 5 dumpsters worth of junk that we've hauled out of the park. So all of that kind of immediate stuff that we can do, we've been busy doing all of that kind of stuff. And then on the last front here, filling vacant spaces is going to be an integral part of the success of this property. The challenge that you have today is because of supply chain issues and those kind of things. You can't get homes delivered as fast as you once could. So right now with the major suppliers in the United States, it'll take 18 months to get a new home delivered to a park. We don't want to wait that long. That doesn't mean we won't put some homes on order with those suppliers, because we can certainly do that as well. But we've got relationships with some smaller home manufacturers that we believe will be able to deliver those in half that time. So we're negotiating a large order with them, so that would be an ongoing thing that they would deliver at a greater speed so that we can fill up spaces and sell homes quicker. So that's the update, our property status for Palm Harbor Estates. Now let's talk about future acquisitions. So on this page, we're always going to talk about the market update on the left-hand side and kind of when we expect the next capital raise to occur in the fund. So nothing has really changed on the demand front. There's still just as much demand for mobile home parks as there has been over the last 3 or 4 years. What has changed a little bit is that the prices and the cap rates have started to flatten out. And that's because of the uncertainty around interest rates. So we don't know what will happen, but when the Fed raises rates, cap rates come down or go up, and prices tend to flatten out. So let's talk about this 400+ space park. So we've known this owner for about 5 years. We've been visiting with him in person for about 2 years. There's 2 families that have owned this park for a quarter of a century together. They don't necessarily like each other, even though they once did. They have their own, selfish interests and their own motivations moving forward. But the good news is we've been selected as the only one that they want to do business with because of the relationship that we've built. So we're confident that we're going to be able to execute. The uncertainty is how long will it take for them to get their ducks in a row and get into agreement around negotiating contracts and structure and all that kind of stuff. So we got our attorneys talking to each other finally, so we're in a pretty good spot, but we can't predict the speed at which that will happen. Okay, final page, fund performance page. So let's touch on the right-hand side first. Normally up here on the top, you're going to see a percentage that will reflect against the initial projections that we underwrote when we acquired the park in the first place. Nate likes to start that at the end of the second quarter of ownership. So you'll see that historic number there. This number right here actually is the correct number. So this has been modified to take that debt service, those deferred debt payments out. So this is the actual distributable cash flow for the quarter. This represents an annualized distribution number for the quarter. So we almost made the 6 pref, even though we're just getting started here. So 100% of that goes to the LPs, 0 goes to the GPs. So this will create a small shortfall that we need to catch up for the investors that were invested in Q4. So you have to get your 6% before we get ours. So on your individual statements, this number here is going to be a little bit different for each of you because of it will reflect the number of days that you were actually invested. Some of you invested in Q3 and you've been invested longer. Some didn't invest until early Q4, so you've been invested less, but you'll see your individual statement will share that. So again, the note, there was a correction, another correction there, made to the member statements and distributions. So I just want to make sure that I include that on the report. Q4 revenue proved to be slightly better than projected, and we expect that to continue again in Q1. Bottom line, small shortfall of preferred return in Q4, which is something we expected. I wouldn't expect us to consistently be over that 6% hurdle, probably until the end of 2022. The cost segregation study on Palm Harbor State is done. The taxes on our side is done. The tax work that Verivest has to do just got completed. So the taxes have just been put on our accountant's desk at CBIZ. So they give us a target every year of delivery on or before March 31st. So I would assume that we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but just count on getting those on or before the 31st of March. And then, of course, the passive losses that you guys are all expecting will show up on your K1s. So distributions have already taken place. Investors who receive the direct deposit you'll have already seen those. Anybody who's reinvesting their distribution, you'll see that increase on your paid-in capital on your investor dashboard when you pull your statement. So in your investor dashboard, you're going to see the P&L, the balance sheet, and these are all updated to reflect the correction that we just made, along with your updated individual investor statement. So thank you guys. Appreciate you guys' patience here for a couple extra days while we made this correction. Look forward to sharing our success with you again next quarter.